So the tour that we're going to watch today is called Walking by Faith, the Widow's Gift, based on Mark chapter 12, 41 through 44. And when you think about it, that's just a few verses there where you can have an entire tour based on it, right? But we put a lot of work and effort and research into this. So we hope that you enjoy the imagery, the sound effects, the information, and that you benefit from the widow's gift and what we can learn from her example. Really, it's a way to help us appreciate the way that she gave what she did and the attitude that she had when she did so. So there will be moments where I'll ask for you to help us with Bible texts. When that comes up, you can use your virtual hands, please. Otherwise, we'll be using what are called polls here on the Zoom platform. A, B, C, or D will appear on your screen. I believe this tour just has A, B, or C, but there's up to D on the poll questions there. But whichever one has the most votes is the one that we'll go with. That's kind of the way this tour works. And so we'll see if you have all the answers correct or not. So, very good. Without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. I think I've got everything set up here. Very good. We are ready. So as we embark on this journey through the pages of Mark chapter 12, 41 through 44, we find ourselves immersed in a narrative that goes beyond the temporal, reaching deep into the concerns of Jehovah himself for those often overlooked and marginalized widows. Now, in biblical times, a widow was not merely a woman bereaved of her husband. She was a symbol of resilience, faith, and also showed the care that Jehovah provided. So really a lot that we can glean from the example of widows in the Bible. But of course, as you might imagine, it was a challenging state in Bible times, and the divine laws, both patriarchal and Mosaic, provided guidelines for their care and for their protection. The very essence of the widow's journey was not just the absence of a spouse, but really the courage to navigate life's challenges by herself, often facing societal neglect along the way. But of course, the concern of Jehovah for widows echoes throughout the Bible. In fact, at Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 18, he identifies himself as the one executing judgment for the fatherless boy and the widow. The law emphasized the importance of equal justice and condemned those who perverted the judgment of widows. Prophets reiterated the call for proper treatment of these vulnerable individuals, highlighting Jehovah's view of justice and compassion. Truly, Jehovah was concerned and cared for widows in Bible times. And of course, we have the example of the early Christian congregation. This brought forth a new era of care for them. In Acts chapter 6, verses 1 through 6, the apostles addressed the oversight of Greek-speaking widows, underscoring the importance of equitable distribution within the Christian congregation. The Apostle Paul, in fact, at 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 3 through 16, provided instructions, right? Provided instructions for the loving care of widows, emphasizing the role of families and congregations in supporting those in need. And in this image, we can see perhaps Timothy himself helping a widow in different ways. So that was something that the congregation viewed as important, necessary, and an extension of Jehovah's love. Of course, throughout the Bible, we have exemplary widows of faith, very good examples. Amidst the tapestry of widows in the Bible, stories unfold of remarkable faith and resilience, such as Tamar, Naomi, Ruth, Abigail, the widow of Zarephath, and Anna, the prophetess, all embodying faith, strength, and devotion to Jehovah. And Jesus himself commended an unnamed widow for sacrificially giving all she had to the temple, illustrating the profound impact of even the smallest acts of faith. So as we delve into the widow's narrative, taken from Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44, really we want to see not just a historical account, but really witness the unfolding of a narrative that intertwines with our own lives. There's so many things that we can learn from this Bible reading, and we're going to take it verse by verse to really take all the nutrients that we can out of these verses, and therefore enjoy this Bible account in more than just 4 verses, but really what we can take away from it individually. So perhaps we can start by just reading a few verses before the Bible reading that we really want to focus on. And that's Mark chapter 12, 38 through 40. There, Jesus sets the stage for a contrast between displays of religious observance and what really is genuine acts of faith and sacrifice. So here's our first Bible text we want to read together, Mark chapter 12, 38 through 40. I brought my physical Bible today, but it's in Spanish, so I'll follow along as you read it in English. Very good. Let's ask Sister Diane Person.
Okay, I'm just unmuting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
And that's Mark chapter 12, verses 38 through 40.
Yes, please.
Okay, and it reads, and in his teaching, he went on to say, beware of the scribes who want to walk around in robes and want greetings in the marketplace, in front seats in the synagogue, in the most prominent places, meals. They devour the house of widow, and for show they make prayers. These will receive a more severe judgment.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your reading there. Very good. So we can see an example of these ones there, can't we? But according to Jesus, what then were the specific actions of the scribes and Pharisees that warranted such criticism? And I'll give a poll here in just a moment, but let's read the options first. A, was it that they were neglecting the study of the scriptures and failing to uphold the law of Moses? Was it B, they were exploiting widows and indulging in lengthy, ostentatious prayers for public display? Or was it C, they were engaging in corrupt business practices and ignoring the needs of the poor and marginalized? Here comes that poll. We look forward to getting your feedback. Whichever one has the most votes is the one that we will go with. So D is available, but that's for other tours. So this one will only have A, B, or C. If you're just joining us now, we are on our first question on the tour. According to Jesus, what were the specific actions of the scribes and Pharisees that warranted his criticism? And it looks like we've got 15% with A, 53% with B, 30% with C. And there's a couple out there who've chosen D, even though it's not an option. That's all right. No problem. So B has the most votes, 54%. Thank you so much for that. Moving windows around here. That is correct, of course. In Mark chapter 12, 38 through 40, he criticizes the scribes and Pharisees for their hypocritical behavior there, right? He specifically highlighted 2 actions that they were committing. One, exploiting widows. Jesus condemns these religious leaders for taking advantage of vulnerable widows, exploiting them for their own gain. And this likely involved financial manipulation or neglecting to provide proper support and care for them. 2, he also pointed out their lengthy and ostentatious prayers. They were criticized there, of course, because they were showing insincere and showy prayers. They wanted those around them to see them. It wasn't something sincere or genuine in their way that they were praying to Jehovah. Instead of showing humility and genuine devotion, they were seeking admiration. So this is something, of course, that Jesus was condemning, and of course, Jehovah in turn did not accept. Very good. So now that we've examined Jesus' condemnation of the scribes and Pharisees for their hypocrisy, let's shift our focus to a remarkable event that immediately follows, and we observe Jesus there sitting in the temple. Mark chapter 12, 41 through 44. Therein, we encounter a powerful illustration of true faith and sacrificial giving. So, as we look at this passage, we'll witness a stark contrast between the self serving actions of those religious elite and the humble devotion of a certain unnamed widow. And there's so many things that we can learn from her example. So here's an opportunity to raise your virtual hand. I can see some already doing that, to read Mark chapter 12 and verse 41. Very good. Thank you so much for your help. Let's go with Sister Alice Bird, please.
And he sat down with the treasure chest in view and began observing how the crowd was dropping money into the treasure chest. And many rich people were dropping in many coins. Now a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins of very little value. So he called his disciples to him and said to them, Truly I say to you that this poor widow put in more than all the others who put money into the treasury chest. For they all put in out of their surplus, but she out of her want. But in everything she has, all she has to live on.
All right. Thank you very much. And we're just going to focus on the first verse there. We thank you for reading all that. We're going to go through it verse by verse. But the first verse there is the one that we're going to focus our attention on. Thank you very much for that. Very good. So, on what day and year did the events described in Mark chapter 12, verse 41 take place? This, of course, isn't in your Bible reading, but it's interesting to take into account. Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. On what day did it take place? Was it A, Nisan 11 of 33 CE? Was it B, Tishrei the 3rd of 30 CE? Or was it Adar 15 of 35 CE? Well, to get your feedback, we will launch that poll again, and you can let us know A, B, or C, which one you think is correct. Okay, see your votes coming in. We've got B and C with just a few of those votes, while A has 68% more or less. Very good. We'll wait just another second. Excellent. Looks like A has won. So let's check if that's correct. Nice and 11 of 33 CE. That is correct. It is Nisan 1133 CE, less than a week before Jesus' death. So that's important to take into account, right? He has spent much of the day teaching in the temple, and now he's moved to another part of the temple, here likely the area called the Court of the Women, where you can see the treasury chests along the walls of the court. And he sits down and begins observing the people as they put their contributions into the chests there. So he sees many rich people depositing many coins, and perhaps he's close enough to hear the loud jingling as their coins drop into the chests. But imagine all the commotion that's happening, right? Can you picture yourself there, hearing people maybe talking with each other, walking around, people moving, the falling of these coins into these chests? So that's what Jesus is doing just a week before his death. He is what we would call people watching, right? You ever done that? Go to the mall or the park and just observe people as they go about their activities. It's kind of fun, right? So that's kind of what Jesus was doing. Maybe he was reflecting on the fact that his human life was ending, and this was an opportunity for him to people watch, watch Jehovah's creation going about their activities there in the temple. So, according to rabbinic sources, the temple built by Herod, which is where Jesus was at this moment, contained 13 of these treasury chests called shofar chests. The Hebrew word shofar means ram's horn, indicating that at least part of the chest, as we can see in this illustration, might have been shaped like a horn or a trumpet. So people deposited in them various offerings, and the Greek word used here occurs at John chapter 8, verse 20, where it's rendered the treasury, apparently located in the area called the Court of the Women, where Jesus was sitting. So if it was in fact shaped like something like this, and you've likely seen these in the uh, um, different publications by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, right? They often show them something like this. But what kind of effect, what kind of sound would this produce? Well, let's listen closely to the difference between the sound of many coins, those who may have had many coins to drop in at once, and someone, like we'll meet in just a moment, who had just a few small coins to drop. Let's listen to the first, which is the sound of many coins dropping. That's pretty easy to spot, right? What about the sound of just a couple of coins being dropped in? Did you hear that? Probably not. No, just a little bit. Imagine all the commotion in the temple that day. Would you be able to hear something like this? Likely you would hear something like this. But just a few small coins, well, that's really something to think about, isn't it? So from early times, the Israelites were accustomed to making payments to support true worship, but this matter of taxation became complicated and burdensome for the Jews in Jesus' day. As one means of support at the worship of God's sanctuary, all adult Jews were to pay a half shekel or 2 drachmas. And in the first century, that was used to care for the upkeep and sacrifices at the temple that Herod built. Some Jews asked Peter about Jesus' stand on the matter, and he didn't oppose the tax. In fact, Jesus directed Peter to go and get a coin to pay that tax at Mark chapter 17, 24 through 27. Do you remember how he was supposed to go and get that coin? Well, we'll see an example of that in just a moment, but that's an interesting story to reflect on as well. So it's evident that the Israelites had numerous responsibilities towards the maintenance of the temple in Jerusalem, the center of true worship at that time. So sacrifices and offerings were an integral part of their worship to Jehovah. In fact, the law commanded that none should appear before Jehovah empty-handed, Deuteronomy 16:16. So, to a certain extent, right, this was an assignment. It was something very important, and it was viewed as such, especially taking into account Bible texts such as Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16. So, which coin was often used for the temple tax mentioned at Matthew 17:24? Without looking at it again. What was the coin often used for that temple tax? Was it A, the lepton, B, the drachma, or C, the denarius? I'll launch that poll again and we'll get your feedback. Well, we've still got some joining us this afternoon. That's cool. Very nice. Very good. Looks like the votes are coming in. There's just a few with A, the lepton. There's quite a few. In fact, most of the votes are with B, drachma, and a few with C, which is the denarius. Very good. Thank you for your participation with that. So the majority of the votes, 66%, went with B. That is, of course, correct. The Jews paid an annual temple tax of 2 drachmas, a didrachma. The drachma was a Greek silver coin still in use in the 1st century CE. The Attic drachma bore the head of the goddess Athena on one side and an owl on the other side. So, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Athena was renowned as goddess not only of war and wisdom, but also of crafts and skilled peacetime pursuits in general. The owl, on the other side of this coin, was regularly associated by the pagan Greeks with Athena, and it is evidently from this mythology that the owl has been unduly credited with being wise. So this coin, of course, we can see reflected on it pagan gods, pagan practices, and ideals, not giving any kind of credit to the true God, which of course is to be expected, right? But interesting this fact about the owl. You know, oftentimes when they speak of an owl, it's related to books and studying and being wise, and now you can see where this idea came from. They associate it with Athena, a Greek goddess, and therefore say that the owl is wise in itself as well. And we appreciate that. All of God's creation is beautiful and wonderful. And undoubtedly, the owl is wise, but they gave it this undue attribution, we might say. Very good. So here we will see a couple of these coins that were common in Jesus' day. This first one in the middle, of course, is Matthew 17:27, where they obtained that coin, which was to be paid to Caesar. And you can remember that account and how Jesus told him to go about retrieving it. But in Jesus' day, the lepton was still in use. This was a Jewish copper or bronze coin, very small. It wasn't very round. It was just kind of crudely pressed, as we'll see in just a moment. Next up, what might be considered 5 cents, would be the quadrans, which was Roman, copper or bronze. Thereafter, what we might consider 25 cents or something similar, right, would be the Assyrian, which was Roman, copper or bronze as well. The denarius was a silver coin, Roman. This was the equal to a day's wages or 12 hours of work. At the end of the day, this is the pay that you would receive. The drachma, which is Greek and also silver, was same, right? It was considered the same. 12 hours of work, this is what you would receive as far as a Greek coin goes. The didrachma, which is also Greek and silver, was 2 days' wages. And the tetradrachma, we have an example here of that which you would receive in Antioch, or of course the tetradrachma of Tyre. So a couple of examples there of the coins that were common, still in use in Jesus' day. So as we transition from Mark chapter 12, verse 41 to 42, we move from observing the actions of the crowd to all those people who were in the temple that day, and we focus specifically on the poignant moment when Jesus notices a poor widow making her contribution. So this shift in focus invites us, as Jesus did, to pause and reflect on the significance of her seemingly insignificant act in the midst of all that was happening in the courtyard that day. So again, we'll continue with Mark chapter 12. And right now, just verse 42, please. We don't need to read any other verses at this moment. Just verse 42. Who'd like to read that for us? Thank you very much. Sister Marilyn Harper, please.
Now a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins of very little value. Did you hear
Excellent.
me?
Thank you so much. Yes. Yes, very good. Thank you so much, sister. Very good. That is the key Bible text there. So one woman catches Jesus' attention, right? She is a poor or needy widow, as Luke 21, verse 2 says. So life is difficult for her. She likely struggles to obtain the basic necessities of life. Yet she goes to one of these chests and discreetly puts in 2 small coins, which, as we heard earlier, probably made very or no sound at all as they were dropped in the chest, especially with all the noise in the afternoon there. But Jesus knows what she deposited. Can you imagine that? How far away Jesus was sitting? We're not real certain. The Bible doesn't say. But Jesus took note, and he knew what it was. He knows that she dropped in 2 lepta coins, the smallest coins in circulation at that time. So in the first century, 2 sparrows sold for a coin of small value, the equivalent of 45 minutes' wages. In fact, 5 sparrows could be obtained for double this price, or the wages of about 90 minutes' work. And this we can reference in Matthew chapter 10, verse 29, and Luke chapter 12, verse 6. So the temple contribution made by the needy widow, whom Jesus observed, was worth far less than that. These 2 coins, which you can observe here, 2 lepta coins, were the smallest copper coins used in Israel at that time. They were the equivalent of less than 12 minutes' wages based on an average workday of 12 hours. So if you hold out your hand, you can have an example there of just how small it would be in your hand. And that's something that we want to keep in mind. 2 small coins of such small value and of such small size physically in the human hand. And yet this is what she had and this is what she gave in the temple that day. And though they were struck many decades before Jesus was born, the leptons here, issued by Hasmonean king Alexander Jannaeus, were still widely used in Judea during the time of Jesus' ministry. And the vast majority of them were just like this. You might think that after years of erosion and being found, so much time later, that this is how they ended up being. However, they weren't round. They were just ragged scraps of copper. So this is likely what they looked like when they were formed at that time. So as a widow, she was not required to give the head tax, and with limited means, she was probably not even able to meet the minimum requirements for the burnt offerings or the wood or incense offerings. So typically, these are things that someone would have provided. However, she wanted to do something to show her love for Jehovah. She did not want to be counted out or just leave it to those who could afford it. But how did Jesus view her offering? Let's read Mark chapter 12, verse 43. Very nice. We've already got some hands raised there. Sister Carmen Mejia, please. Mark chapter 12, verse 43.
It reads, So he called his disciples to him and said to them, Truly I say to you, that this poor widow put in more than all the others who put money into the treasury chests.
Excellent. Thank you so much, sister. Very good. So how did Jesus evaluate the widow's contribution compared to the others? Did they all put in contributions that were equal? A. Was it B, that the widow's was greater? Or C, that the rich gave more? Here comes that poll, so you can give us your feedback on how Jesus viewed her contribution there. And take into account, right, that he called his disciples to him because he was observing this very moment and he wanted to teach them about this. Very good. Looks like we've got just a few with A and C, while 91% is with B. Thank you for that. Go ahead and end that poll. And that is, of course, correct, right? In comparison, Luke 21, verse 3 says, Truly I say to you, that this poor widow put in more than they all did. Additionally, Mark chapter 12, verse 43 in the study edition references 2 Corinthians 8:12. So, of course, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they all have similar accounts about these things, but Mark chapter 12, verse 43 references 2 Corinthians 8:12, which is interesting to take into account. So let's go ahead and read that together. Sister Patricia Martin, if you could read that for us, please.
For if the readiness is there first, it is especially acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what a person does not have.
Thank you so much, sister. Very good. Interesting to see that referenced, isn't it? Because when the readiness is there, as the Bible text says, when a person is motivated by love, what he or she offers will be acceptable to Jehovah, no matter how seemingly small it may be. So isn't that beautiful to think about? Oftentimes we think, well, I can only do so much, or I would love to give more, but this is all I have. But if you're giving it with the right motivation, if it's love that motivates you to do that, well, that's something that's admirable to Jehovah. Jehovah notices that and he appreciates whatever one is able to give, right? So really nice to see that reference and see how it applies to this moment in the widow's life. But let's reflect a little bit more on other aspects of this widow's life. Now, the Bible only gives us these 4 verses about her, but there's so much that we can perhaps take into account that helps us to appreciate her life even more so. Besides her economic contribution, what other sacrifices were perhaps made this day or in the life that she was living? For example, the Bible doesn't specify the exact distance that the widow lived from the temple, so we can only speculate, right? But the temple in Jerusalem, which was the central place of worship for the Jewish people, people from various regions would make pilgrimages to the temple, and the distance they traveled could vary. So here, of course, is the temple. If you lived over here somewhere, well, it just would be a matter of entering into the temple and walking up, coming into this area here, which is, of course, the court of the women. But what if you lived over this mountain? Wouldn't that be a sacrifice in itself? Can you imagine? How many areas perhaps would she have to cross through to be able to get to the temple that day? Perhaps there were even dangerous territories with wild animals, or even, people who were robbers, or who knows what other type of circumstances would have been required for her, wherever she may have lived, to get up and into the temple that day. And again, remember the size of those two small coins in your hand? Right here in the center, right? So, being as she only had two small coins, would you put that in, say, a pouch or something to carry with you all that distance if there was such a great distance for her? Wouldn't it be more likely that you would carry those two small coins in your hand with your hand clutched like this the whole time? It's very possible, right? So that you wouldn't lose them. If that's all you had to give, you would hold on dearly to those two small coins. Isn't that true? So let's add that up, right? If she had a long distance to carry, she had two small coins, she's clutching her fist that whole time through whatever kind of terrain to get up to the temple that day and to deposit them. Well, quite a few sacrifices were made that day to give that to Jehovah. What about her living conditions? Well, we can take into account what we can observe through the Bible. During the time when the biblical account of the widow's offering took place, the homes of poor people would have varied, but they generally had certain common characteristics, and we'll see an example of that in just a second. Perhaps simple construction, typical, simple, rudimentary in construction. They would have been small, often consisting of just a few rooms, if only one at that, with basic furnishings. If she had furniture, maybe a bed, maybe a chair or table, but likely very basic. Limited amenities. They would have not had the amenities, of course, that offered wealthier residents, their homes. And many were one room dwellings, which may have been her case. They were built of sun dried and mud bricks or rough hewn stones. Often the interior walls were plastered. The floors may have been just beaten earth, or some may have been branches, reeds, rafters, something like that. And of course, the dirt was pressed down for a roof, forming plaster that made a reasonably waterproof ceiling. They may have had access to a roof by means of stairs or outside. So, if this was her home, it was very simple, practical, but not a lot of space to move around in. Everything that she would have done would have been done here. Sleeping, eating, if she'd done anything at all, would have been done in just one small space. And again, how far away that was from the temple, well, we don't know, but could have been quite a distance as well. So this gives us an opportunity, right? If we're just focusing on the widow, let's take into account all of it. What might her life have been like before? And this is kind of fun to think about. We're going to observe possible aspects of her life before this, leading up to this moment in her life. And after that, we'll go into the future. What might her life be like in the future after all of this was said and done? For example, the widow likely came from a typical Jewish family in ancient Judea. She might have grown up in a modest home in a village or town, and she would have followed the customs and traditions of her community. And at a relatively young age, she would have been married, as was the custom for Jewish girls to marry in their late teens or early 20s during that time. Isn't that a nice portrait of her and her husband? In her early years of marriage, perhaps her and her husband might have had a more comfortable economic situation. Perhaps they were involved in an occupation that provided a stable income. In fact, may have been that her husband was a skilled craftsman, a farmer, or engaged in some sort of trade. So this type of stability would have allowed them to have a modest but comfortable life, providing for their basic needs and even having perhaps a small surplus. And of course, the widow and her husband might have had children. They would have been a close knit family. They would have lived in a small but simple household, adhering to the traditions and faith of the Jewish people. They would have participated in activities and religious observances, including visits to the temple in Jerusalem. So, kind of a similar picture of that of Jesus and his parents, don't you think? Uh, yeah, getting ready to go up to the temple. So, that may have been a typical situation for her and her family as well. And of course, as a faithful Jewish family, they would have been aware of the importance of charitable giving, helping those in need, helping others. They would have regularly donated to support the less fortunate. They would have had a more prosperous years, perhaps, in which they could have contributed more to others. So she likely had the opportunity and the what's the word I'm looking for there? The custom, right? The custom of giving to others in whatever way possible. So a humble woman, one who was giving to others, showing love, and what a beautiful example for us. That being the case, of course, seeing her at the end of her life, this was all very true of her, wasn't it? But over time, circumstances would have changed in the family. Perhaps her husband faced economic challenges or illness, or even when he at some point passed away. These would have led to a gradual decline in their financial stability. Perhaps her children were obligated to provide for the family for some time, and maybe they even passed away under some sort of circumstance or moved away with their own families, kind of leaving their mother to be able to be tended to by others. So whatever the situation, really situation changed, isn't that true? As time went on. Now we can go back to Mark chapter 12, verses 43 and 44, and read Jesus's observations here. Now that we've looked at what her life may have been like, we'll return to this moment in her life and see how Jesus observed it. Sharon Timbers, please, sister, if you could read those verses for us.
Here we are. Sorry. I'll be with you.
No problem.
Okay. Verses 43 and 44 read, it says, "So he called his disciples to him and said to them, truly I say, am I reading the right one?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I'm so sorry. Truly
No
I
problem.
say to you that this poor widow put in more than all the others who put money into the treasury chests, for they all put in out of their surplus, but she, out of her want, put in everything she had, all she had to live on."
Thank you very much. Excellent. So the widow's act of giving all she had to live on, as we just read in the temple, could be seen as a reflection of her earlier life of generosity and faith. Despite the economic difficulties that she and her family would have experienced, her willingness to give everything demonstrated her unwavering commitment to her faith, her love for Jehovah, and the desire to continue helping those in need, especially in her own time of need, right? She had only 2 small coins to live on, but she gave it to Jehovah. So this act of selflessness and devotion to Jehovah's principles is really what made her offering so significant and admirable in the eyes of Jesus. And he used it as a moment of teaching for his disciples. So when this faithful widow gave her last bit of money that day, she was putting her life in Jehovah's caring hands. She was saying, basically, this is all I have, Jehovah, but you've helped me up till now, and I know that you're going to continue to do so. So you gave this to me, I return it to you. No doubt she wished that she could have given more, yet she did what she could. She gave Jehovah her very best. Isn't it true? Can't we say that? That's what she had. It was what she had to give to Jehovah, so it was her very best. Very true, right? And Jesus knew that her contribution was precious in Jehovah's eyes. Psalms chapter 26, verse 3 gives us something to reflect on in this regard. Psalms chapter 26 and verse 3. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to see so many hands up for this Bible text. Very nice. Sister Eleanor Johnson, please. You can unmute your microphone there. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
No
Psalms
problem.
26:3. For your loyal love is always in front of me, and I walk in your truth.
Thank you so much. Very nice. So, reflecting on this Bible verse, right? What was always in front of her? Jehovah's loyal love, right? Always in front of me, the
Yes.
Bible text says. So, yeah, thank you so much, sister. And it continues to say, and I walk in your truth. So when we have love for Jehovah, it guides all that we do. And we walk, therefore, in his truth. We do what is pleasing to Jehovah. So likely this widow was taking that into account. She was walking in truth, knowing that Jehovah's loyal love was always in front of her. And the way that she could show her love to Jehovah was by giving back to him all that she had. Very nice. So now that we've observed her life before, her life at this moment, it gives us something to reflect on. What might her life be like in the future? Have you considered this, thinking about this widow? We don't know what happened to her, to this widow hereafter, right? Likely Jehovah continued to care for her in one form or another. Maybe she was even close to death. But what might hold for her in the future could be something like this, right? Meditating on her faith for the future and what Jehovah's kingdom might promise for individuals like her who are generous and humble, we can draw insights from the teaching of Jesus, particularly his emphasis on the qualities that are valued in Jehovah's kingdom. And you appreciate, no doubt, that the meek ones will inherit the earth, right? What does meek mean? Well, it's a person who is humble, one who is teachable, one who isn't haughty. And this is, of course, one of the better qualities that we can say we find in the widow. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. Would someone like to read that verse for us? Sister Walea Valentin?
Yes.
You can unmute your microphone there.
It says, happy are those conscious of their spiritual need, since the kingdom of the heavens belongs to them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So Jesus often spoke of eternal blessings in the kingdom of Jehovah, right? The widow's generosity and humility reflects the kind of heart that Jesus taught would be blessed. So she lived at the time, of course, when Jesus was teaching such things. Maybe she was even present at some of those moments where Jesus was publicly teaching these things, such as Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. The Bible doesn't say for sure, but maybe she was there listening to him when he said these things. So no doubt she had this in mind of being resurrected, of being in a future where she would be able to be under Jehovah's kingdom. And of course, other aspects we could say the widow's act demonstrated her wealth was not tied to material possessions, but to her faith, to her relationship with Jehovah. She, of course, may have heard Jesus speak of true wealth being found in one's spiritual treasures rather than having earthly treasures. So she no doubt understood and appreciated Matthew 6:19 through 20, which again she may have heard with her own ears. We're not sure, right? Matthew chapter 6:19 and 20. Who'd like to read those verses for us? Lois and Marie Michelle from Washington, please.
Thank you. It says, "Stop storing up for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. Rather, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal."
Excellent. Thank you so much. So she undoubtedly would have liked to have had more, but she accepted that this was her situation. And more so than anything, she was storing up treasure in heaven. Isn't that true? By showing us a humble attitude, giving all she had to Jehovah. No doubt she also held close to her heart the opportunity to be reunited with her family. John chapter 5, 28 and 29 outlines where Jesus spoke of the memorial tombs where they would hear his voice and come out. So undoubtedly, this was something that she reflected on that gave her comfort. John chapter 5, 28 and 29. Sister Lily Sanford, please.
Says, "Do not be amazed at this, for the hour is coming in which all those in the memorial tombs will hear his voice and come out. Those who did good things to a resurrection of life, and those who practice vile things to a resurrection of judgment."
Very nice. Thank you so much. So these are comforting words for us, something that we no doubt hold on to. And this was true for the widow, no doubt. She was looking forward to the time when she would be reunited with her family once again. But of course, before we continue on, it's worth mentioning, right? She lived during Jesus' time when Jesus was preaching and teaching. There's also a possibility that this widow could have been, could have had the heavenly hope. Isn't that true? We don't know for sure. The Bible doesn't say, of course, but that may also be a future which she had before her to be in heaven as one of the 144,000. So that's something interesting to think about as well. So it's just like a secondary possible future for this widow. But if we have the opportunity to see her in paradise, well, then we'll have many more questions and many more things to discuss with her, no doubt. Should we find out who she was, and therefore we can know her name as well. So as we conclude our exploration of the widow's remarkable act of faith, we can really take into account the lessons woven into her story. Her offering, though small in worldly value, speaks volumes about the true measure of devotion and the love that we should have for Jehovah. But we can see a little bit further how they might reflect, how they might resonate with our own lives, and how we can reflect her qualities as well. So here's a few here. I won't launch the poll because we're going to go through them anyway, but there's a few of the qualities of the widow's character that we can look at. For example, her selflessness and willingness to give all she had. For example, the widow's selflessness is evident in her willingness to give all that she had despite her own poverty and need. In our own lives, we, for example, can emulate her selflessness by seeking opportunities to give, whether it's through financial contributions, acts of service, or simply offering our time and resources to those in need. At this time of the end, and especially as we get closer to this end of this system of things, it's going to be more and more necessary to show the type of love that Jesus taught his disciples. Isn't that true? He said that this type of love that he taught would be what distinguishes them from everyone else. So giving of our time, of our resources to our brothers and sisters, that's going to be something necessary. And we can do so starting now, showing ourselves ready to give. That's what the widow did. Also, her humility, her faithfulness, even though she was in difficult circumstances, she didn't seek recognition or praise. She wasn't out there tooting her own horn, as they say, right? But she quietly and faithfully entrusted her livelihood to Jehovah, her life. So in our lives, we too can learn from her example by cultivating a spirit of humility and faithfulness in all circumstances, trusting in Jehovah's provision and guidance. And there will be moments in the future where we're uncertain. Maybe we even receive instructions that we don't really understand or that make much sense. But we can follow the example of this widow and be patient and be obedient and really trust in Jehovah and those that He is assigning here on earth, imperfect men, to give us instructions that will undoubtedly save our lives and show our trust in Jehovah. Lastly, her trust in Jehovah's provision, despite her circumstances. Well, her actions reflect a deep-seated faith that transcends material wealth and security, highlighting the importance of prioritizing our relationship with Jehovah above earthly concerns. So we can follow her example by placing our trust in Jehovah while faithfully caring for the resources He has entrusted to us. Remember that she had only 2 small coins. Maybe she had it close to her, or maybe it was those 2 small coins in her hand that whole time. Well, how do we treat the things that Jehovah has allowed us to have at this time of the end? Maybe we have an older car, an older automobile. Do we just, let whatever happen to it, or do we try to take good care of it? Because we can see it as a resource that He's given us to go door to door, to go to the field service group, to get to meetings, to our work. Isn't that true? So we do well to take the best care of it that we can. Change the oil, make sure the tires are good, keep it clean. Just as an example, right? But undoubtedly, there are other things that you can think of that help us to appreciate this point. Take care of the things that Jehovah's given us, not to be overworking ourselves to obtain things that we don't need, and really appreciating all that we do have and knowing that the most important things are covered. We have a roof over our head, we have food on the table, we have a job, but none of those things should take first place. Instead, Jehovah's kingdom should be at the forefront of it all. So the widow's story serves as a timeless reminder that true worship is not measured by the size of our offerings or the quantity, but really by the sincerity of our hearts. Her sacrificial giving challenges us to examine our attitudes towards generosity and our devotion to Jehovah. And think about this. Is it not significant that out of all the people who came to the temple that day, this widow was singled out and mentioned in the Bible? Through this example, Jehovah teaches us that He is an appreciative God. He is pleased to accept our whole-souled gifts, no matter how small they may be, compared to others. And in fact, He invites us not to compare ourselves or what we are able to give to others, because He appreciates what we give. Jehovah truly could have not found a better way to teach us without this heartwarming truth, as we can see in this widow's example. So an excellent idea for us. Here we can see a brother opening the front door for somebody. We can see Jehovah's smile of approval on those small acts of kindness that we can show towards others today. So while all of us have the privilege of lending support to true worship by means of material possessions, what is truly precious in Jehovah's sight is not our giving of what we can do without, that is to say, our surplus. Remember that so many that day were giving out of their surplus, but really what we can do without those necessary things. She had only 2 small coins to live on, but she gave it to Jehovah. So in other words, are we giving something that we will not miss? Or is our giving a real sacrifice? If so, then Jehovah is going to appreciate that much more than just what we're able to give out of our surplus. That is to say, in all ways, not just monetarily, but perhaps we don't have strength at the end of the day, yet a brother needs help. Perhaps we don't have so much to give monetarily, but we can give $2, $5 towards someone who needs something that day. So these are sacrifices that Jehovah takes into account. He appreciates them, and Jehovah never forgets them. So thank you so much for joining us today for Walking by Faith, the Widow's Gift. We hope that you enjoyed your tour with us today. These are QR codes that take you to our donate page. My wife and I, again, are regular pioneers, and your donations help us to produce these tours and to create others like them. Also, your reviews help us to put those on our website and helps other brothers and sisters to appreciate what you felt about the tour that you saw today. So we invite you to visit either by scanning these with your phone or visiting meektravel.com. You can get more information about our tours, upcoming tours, future dates, and other items such as that. And of course, we're on Instagram at meek.travel. If you use social media, you can follow us there. Basically, our posts are similar to all the illustrations you saw throughout the tour. Just Bible texts and, uplifting thoughts and things of that nature for Jehovah's Witnesses and things that you'll undoubtedly enjoy. So if that's of interest to you, we're on meek.travel on Instagram. So again, we thank you so much for your generosity, your help today, your connecting, and your sharing this Bible link with others. I'm going to take you to our website for just a moment before we finish up, just so I can show you some of those things as well, give you an idea of what you'll find at our website. Let's get us out there just a little bit more. meektravel.com, which is in the chat. I put it there at the start of the tour today, is our website. And here we have Bible-based virtual tours such as you've seen today. We are developing one about the Ecuadorian jungle. As mentioned at the outset, we live in Ecuador. So we're developing one that's kind of more like a game, like you make a decision if you decide to go down a wrong path and you might have dangers, or, if you see a pretty flower, then we're going to explain by way of a Bible text, certain aspects of it and things like that. So that's Amazon Adventure. That's you can get a preview of it now by going to Enjoy Now on the virtual tours page. Jesus' Final Hours is a tour that we gave last week, the one that we've just enjoyed today, today's date. And of course, we have the Ark. But it's worth mentioning that all of our tours you can enjoy at your own pace. If you click on Enjoy Now, it's going to use your browser, and you can see the tour just as you've seen the tour this afternoon. So, for example, if you have a family worship night coming up and you're not sure what to do, for that, Jesus' Final Hours is a good tour for families. He uses Bible texts and whatnot to focus on Jesus' last few hours on earth. Any of these tours really works in that sense, and it's A, B, or C, so you can make decisions and whatnot, go through the tour and really enjoy Bible-based information. So that's kind of the idea behind these tours, is that you can do them on Zoom, but you can also do them by yourselves. Audio tours are also available. We've got 3 at the moment. Again, you don't need a plug-in, or you don't need to have a podcast application on your phone. You just go to our website and you can listen to those. This is about Esther. It's about 10 minutes, so not a big use of your time either, but has sound effects and music, so it's kind of fun. You can just press play and listen to it while you're cooking or getting ready for field service or whatever. And so it's kind of just an addition to those. We're going to continue to make more.